Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray and today we have another diamond painting deep dive with Mr. Ray. Say hi, Mr. Ray.
Hi everybody.
So today we are continuing our series on aliens and UFOs and all that fun stuff, and I am very close to finishing this diamond painting, Cauldron of Myrrh by Diamond Art Club. You might notice that I'm doing a little bit of surgery down here. I'll talk about that in our upcoming video tomorrow. But if you are curious as to what I'm using while I'm diamond painting, I'll have everything linked in the description down below. Otherwise, today we're going to start by picking up where we left off last time. And if you haven't been following our playlist, what should they do?
They should follow it.
Yes, you should go watch the previous episodes, please, where the reason for the deep dive is so that you could get lots of information about this specific thing, and our current hyperfixation is on UFOs and aliens. It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
So I've been told that today we're going to be talking in depth about the 50s, the 1950s.
Yeah, we're on to the 1950s, yeah. And I guess, I had never really actually looked into Roswell or anything like that previous to this, you know? Like, the 1950s is really where the whole thing starts to get kind of crazy and loads of reports start coming up, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's like this. I've never bought a Beatles album, you know?
Okay.
Like, I've never bought one.
Yeah.
The Beatles are quite a good band, but I don't need a Beatles album. Like, I could sing you 10 Beatles songs right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're in everything. Like.
You're not a true fan.
I'm not really. I don't think the Beatles are a bad band, but I don't think they're like, wow, they're amazing. Like, but as I said, like, you know, they're so ubiquitous, like, that I could sing, like, if you started a Beatles song, I'd know all the words. Do you know?
Yeah.
It's just the way it is, like.
Yeah.
But I've never bought a Beatles album.
Wow.
Or I've never, like, gone to Spotify and been like, wow, I really fancy some Beatles. Like, do you know what I mean? And
if you're the kind of person that likes Beatles, then, you know.
I don't, no, I like the Beatles. They're a good band. Like, I'm just, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, that I can sing you 10 Beatles songs, but I've never bought a Beatles album or,
Right.
And it's kind of the same with Roswell, like, you know?
Oh.
But everything really kind of kicks off with the UFO thing in the 50s.
Yeah.
You know? Because I guess, come to the early 50s, there's a load of, like, very unusual things that are happening. Well, there some unusual things happen. Like, there's this famous photo, like the McMiniman photo, which is a UFO photo.
Okay.
Now, if you Google the McMiniman photo, you'll be like, oh, I have seen that photo before. Mm-hmm. You know? It's like the side of a barn, and there's this kind of telegraph pole, and it's a little askew, and then there's just a UFO. And it's one of the, you know, kind of like seminal UFO images. And I went looking into it there a few days ago, like, and apparently it still hasn't been kind of debunked or anything, you know? Because they're all on the one, it's all on the one negative and everything, you know?
Right.
So, I guess that's interesting, like. The other thing about it is that the 50s is when all of, like, the big UFO pop culture stuff starts to happen. You know, like, Earth versus...
Since you've had all those accounts happening, right?
Yeah, it's because of the 1947 kind of UFO flap and the things that have developed from that. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted to name, like, an early kind of UFO, like, you know, like, I've written some down here, like Earth versus the Flying Saucers, Invasion of the Saucer Men, you know, that classic The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Plan 9 from Outer Space, and It Came from Beyond the Stars. You know, these all come from the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's a pop sensation, especially in kind of like B-movies and stuff like that.
Totally.
Yeah. There's other kind of things then start happening during the 50s, like people start to have contact with, like, inexplicable contact with aliens, you know? Like, for instance, the things that we've talked about before, like the Flatwoods Monster.
Yes.
You know, which is, can you remember what that kind of looked like?
Yeah.
What did it, off the top of your head, just...
It's like kind of a cone shape, and there's like a ball at the top.
Yeah.
And then there's like rivets and stuff going down.
Yeah, it was riveted, and it was almost shaped like a pawn.
Yeah.
From a chessboard, yeah. And it kind of floated, and it had a face shaped like the spade from a deck of cards.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like a pointed kind of clover shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, do you remember another one that we spoke about before as well? The Kelly Hopkinsville incident.
The Hopkins Goblin.
The Hopkinsville Goblin. Yeah. Do you remember the guys were all in the shack? They were having a hootenanny, and they were just playing some cards and chilling out. And then next thing you know, they're accosted by like 3-foot aliens, and they've got like big ears and. Yeah. And they start blasting. And then they're over and back to the police and stuff. Yeah, so that's another thing that's kind of happening in the 50s as well, as people are having these inexplicable kind of,
hootenannies.
No, they're having inexplicable experiences. But there's also other people like that are, like there's one group of people that they run a kind of campsite and stuff like that in California. Mm-hmm. And in the late 40s, but definitely by the early 50s, they start to have all of these experiences where they're seeing cigar-shaped craft, and they're experiencing light phenomenon in the sky and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's sustained over a number of years, and they take a lot of photographs as well. But I guess it all kind of grows out of, this... It's a cultural milieu that's happening around the UFO and the saucer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's one that's kind of, I think, it's kind of endured through, even if it's a bit schlocky, maybe because it's a bit schlocky, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, this is also the time when the Air Force is setting up its various UFO things, Project Blue Book, Grudge, Sign, etc.
Okay.
You know, but at the time it's Project Blue Book, and basically they're there to collate and look into different UFO sightings, but mainly they're there to rock up to the media and say it was swamp gas or it was a balloon, or
right.
They're kind of damage limitations,
Yeah.
like kind of limiting the damage and stuff. So I guess
your auntie was drunk.
yeah. And the early 50s also has a number of very high profile UFO incidents that are reported by the kind of armed forces and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And one of them is this incident that we're going to talk about here, and it takes place over Washington, DC, over 2 weekends, on the 12th of July, and then 2 weekends later on the 29th of July.
And what year is this?
This is 1952.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the first one is, it's called like the Washington Flap, or sometimes it's called the Invasion of Washington, which I really like.
Yeah.
And then other times it's called Washington National Airport Sightings.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a bit upsetting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is, you'll have a better idea of this than me. This is the airport that later became Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington. So I don't really have a clear idea.
It's not the international one.
I know, yeah, it's the other one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan, the kind of internal one.
I think you can actually get to the DC Metro from underneath Reagan.
Oh, really?
I think that it's looped in.
Ah.
Yeah.
Tunnels and conspiracies.
Tunnels and conspiracy.
Oh, an underground tunnel, you say? So what happens is an air traffic controller at Washington, yeah?
Yeah.
A guy called Edward Nugent, he picks up a kind of weird signal on his radar, and it's about 15 miles away from the airport, but he doesn't know what he's looking at because there was nothing there previously. So he calls over a kind of a more senior colleague, like someone with a bit more experience, and they're both looking at Nugent's radar, and they just don't know what's going on. That is very unusual. so then they call the tower, which is at the other end. Like, they're in a room in the main body of the airport, you know?
Right.
And then they phone the radar tower that's way out the end of the field.
Yeah.
And they explain what they're looking at. And the radar tower goes, what's the heading or whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the radar tower goes out and they pull up some binoculars. And they're like, there's an orange glowing light out there. You know? And the guys are barely getting over, wow, there's an orange glowing light out there, when suddenly they start getting other blips on their radar. All around the place, you know?
Yeah.
Now, initially, they had thought there's something wrong with this equipment.
Okay.
And that's why they phoned the tower.
Right.
Now they've got blips everywhere, you know? And they're in communication with the tower, and they're giving the tower headings, but then the things are like whizzing here and there and disappearing, you know?
Oh, man.
So they get onto the local Air Force Base, Andrews Air Force Base, which is in Washington as well.
I thought you were going to say the local journalists.
Yeah, they get onto the local journalists. And you guys got any news on the UFOs? Yeah, so they get onto Andrews Air Force Base and they speak to a guy there called Barnes. Okay. And they're like, listen, are you getting anything on your radar? He's looking at his radar and he's saying, yeah, we are getting strange stuff on the radar here. You know? So they also have people on watchtowers with binoculars looking around for stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes they see an orange light. Or maybe a white thing whizzed by when you were saying it, you know what I mean? Like a glowing white thing whizzed by or whatever, like. One guy alright, one fella alright, this guy William Brady, who was in the tower at Andrews Air Force Base, says that he did see an object and, quote, the object appeared like an orange ball of fire with a trail of light. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Oh. And this is a guy that like works, you know, at Andrews Air Force Base.
Right.
Yeah. So
he's seen a lot of aircraft.
Yeah, he's an air traffic controller guy at an Air Force Base. Like he'd be familiar with stuff, you know. Yeah. So they're all having a head scratcher, and they're like, "There's definitely loads of stuff on the radar. We can see stuff. What is going on here?" You know. Mm-hmm. Then they get a call from a guy called C.S. Pierman, and C.S. Pierman is a pilot on a Capital Airlines DC-4, which is sitting in the runway on Reagan at what becomes Reagan Field, you know? Yeah. And he's sitting there and he's looking out the window and he sees this orange light and he thinks, that's a meteorite. Cool. And then it keeps going. And then he was like, okay, I've seen meteorites before and they just tend to burn out, but this is just kind of sitting there glowing. Yeah. And kind of moving across the sky kind of thing. So he phones up the tower in the middle of it, and he's like, "Tower, can you see anything, you know, on my, whatever it is, starboard side, like, at this heading?" Mm-hmm. And they kind of confirm that, there is something out there, all right. And then Pierman just basically testifies that over the course of about 15 minutes, these 6 lighted objects just started moving over and back across his field of vision and stuff. Wow. Yeah. So Pierman's there and he's talking to the tower in Reagan. Mm-hmm. And then he gets a call from the other guy, the guy we were talking about before, Barnes, who's the traffic controller, the air traffic controller at the Air Force Base. Yeah. And he starts talking to him and saying, well, where are the lights moving now? And then he's saying it, and they're tracking it on radar, and basically they have, do you know what I mean? They have two different radars that are tracking the same object, and the pilot is telling them where it's going, and they can see it easier or something, you know? Yeah. But like they basically they're confirming the visuals of these objects with radar signals. Right. So there is something there, you know? Yeah. So that's kind of the point. So at around about this, I forgot to mention as well, this all started at about 11 o'clock. At about 11 o'clock at night. Okay. So
I figured because
yeah, I should have said that because it was you could see all the lights and stuff, and it's July. So anyway, by around about 2 a.m. Your man Barnes in Andrews is starting to get kind of like, well, we got to do something. I got to do something. Like, to see things on the radar. There's pilots attesting to seeing things. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to scramble the jets. So he scrambles he scrambles these F-94 Starfires, which are some of the first kind of...
what do you mean by scramble?
Scramble is a bit like, you know, it's exactly what it sounds like scramble, you know, everybody rushes out in their flight suits.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, if they had a fireman's pole, they'd be going down the fireman's pole, you know?
Yeah.
So he scrambles the jets and these F-94 Starfires from Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware. And these jets get up in the air and they start rushing towards them. And it takes them about half an hour, 45 minutes to get over Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get over Washington, D.C., there are no objects. So there's two pilots. Each one has an aircraft. And they're flying around. They're up there for about an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. The guys at the radio towers are like, no, there should be, you know, southwest of you and all this. And they're flying around. They can't see anything. One of them later testifies that he thought he saw something. And he started following it. And it was like a white light that was just always in front and, you know, kind of always just on the edge of outmaneuvering him, but always ahead of him. And he tried to follow it for a while and then he lost it. And anyway, they both go back. They both go back to Delaware at about 5 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, and then as soon as they leave the airspace, just like the lights had gone out and the radar signals had diminished when they came in, they suddenly flared back up again. And for about a half an hour they're getting all these signals and they're trying to catch them on binoculars and stuff like that. And none of that really works out for them. And then that's it. At about 5:30 a.m, no more signals, everything dies down. Your man Barnes, the air traffic controller at Andrews Air Force Base, he said in a quote that he thought that the UFOs were monitoring their radio frequencies and stuff like that, so that when the aircraft showed up, they went away or whatever.
Yeah.
And this story anyway makes the front pages the next day. Because it's over Washington, you know, and there's all these kind of like attack on Washington and, you know, they came for the White House and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so it kind of comes up, it kind of comes up and it becomes a huge thing. And then Project Blue Book gets involved. At the time, like, one of the people, it's a guy called Captain Roy James, is a weather specialist. And he's contacted by Blue Book. And they are basically out ahead of the story with this guy James saying, oh, it's unusual weather phenomenon, you know, it's meteorological activity, trapped static electricity in the upper, you know, stratosphere, and it returned weird radio signals. And I mean, I'm just making this up as I'm going along, but actually that sounds quite plausible. So they got this guy out, and they're... At this time, Blue Book is kind of new, you know?
Okay.
But this is essentially their job, is to get out in front of things.
Right.
Or if they're not in front of things, to make it seem like there was nothing there all along.
Cover-ups.
Yeah, and like, in fairness, you know, 9 out of 10, even probably a higher percentage of strange sightings in the sky can be explained quite straightforwardly, you know? So it's not, you know... But Blue Book as well is based in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which is going to come up again and again and again. Like...
Those Ohioans.
Oh, Wright-Patterson. So Blue Book anyway gets out, right? Ohioans?
Ohioan?
Ohioans?
Anyway.
So everything calms down, and then the next weekend nothing happens, and then the weekend after that again things go kind of crazy, right. You know. So first of all, there's this there's an aircraft, and it's flying to Washington, and it's national airlines this time. Like, the hardest thing about this was that none of the airlines that are involved in this exist anymore. I presume they all just merged and became Delta or American Airlines or something, you know?
Yeah.
Or United or whatever, yeah. So Saturday, July 26th, there's an aircraft and it's coming into Washington, and they observe some planes around their aircraft. And they're a little bit freaked out because they're like flying a massive hunk of metal at 500 miles an hour through the air, you know? And there's these things, they don't know what they are. And they're kind of flying above them. And they said that like they would come along, they were picking them up on their instruments. They would come along, they would come into your field of vision and then just drop back, you know?
Right.
And they were like, what are these things? They're awfully close to our wings, you know, that kind of way. So they phone up the airport, like, and just say, are we, like, what's going on? Are we imagining things? There's these things that seem to be following us, and they're kind of coming up and falling behind us, and, you know, are they going to hit us? What's up here with us? You know?
Yeah.
So the guys look into it, and they said, okay, there actually are slow moving objects behind you, where some of them break away and approach the front of you. Like, they could literally see this on, like, I think it's amazing that they can see this on like 1952 radar as well.
Yeah.
Do you know? So they're not messing around this time, and they just scramble the jets straight out the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got these F-94 Starfires in the air. These guys rock up. Again, there's Captain John McHugo, and there's a guy called Lieutenant William Patterson. Yeah? These guys get on the scene, they start flying around, they can't really see anything. Yeah? This time they're like, oh, let's split up. You go over there, I'll go over here. Yeah?
Yeah.
So they split up, and then Patterson reckons that he sees these 4 glowing orbs. And he's like, oh, I remember these. So he starts following them again.
Yeah.
But this time they're really outmaneuvering him. And then they basically drop down below 1,000 feet, which is like only 300 meters from the ground.
Right.
So yeah,
it's very dangerous.
Yeah, he decides not to follow them down there.
Right.
And then he gets asked by an air traffic controller at the airport, a guy called Albert Chop, if you know, like, where are you? Can you see anything? And he says, I see them now. They're all around me. What should I do? And nobody answers because nobody really knew what to tell him what
like,
to do.
Well,
yeah. So that's, I mean, it's kind of, it's that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But you remember Blue Book was involved? So straight away, the aircrafts get dispatched. This all starts, I should be better at timing. This all starts happening at about 9:30. They scramble the jets at about 11:30. And then basically by midnight, this guy called Dewey Fortinet, who's from the Blue Book, he rocks up and just starts, you know, giving it socks, like with the stuff I said earlier. Oh, you don't even understand when you've got a cold front and a warm front, and one's moist and the other one's dry. The static buildup, you know, in the layer thing will bounce radar signals like you wouldn't believe.
It's gonna make things all weird.
And you can get these balls of plasma. And swamp gas, and then Venus is over there as well. This is all going. This causes a huge furore anyway, yeah.
Right.
It causes such a big furore that all of the like 3-letter agencies, like the Air Force already has a UFO thing, but all of the 3-letter agencies, like your CIAs and your FBIs and your NSA, well, they didn't exist at the time, I don't think, but all of these 3-letter agencies start freaking out, yeah. Okay. The FBI sets up a thing called the Robertson panel, and that's actually set up the very next year, and it's to look into this UFO thing, and it's national security. What would you call it? It's national security implications.
Okay.
It's the first panel. It's the first like congressional official investigation into UFOs.
Wow.
Yeah, and it contains a load of people that become big big characters in it. Particularly, like J. Allen Hynek is involved in this. He's an astronomer.
Okay.
There's another guy. It's headed by a guy called Howard Patterson. There's another guy in it called Luis Alvarez, who's a radar specialist, and a few years later goes on to win the Nobel Prize. There's only 5 people on this panel, so it's really big, you know.
Okay.
What happens here is that this Robertson panel look at 23 accounts, and these accounts are mainly from Project Blue Book, and they look into it and they come to the conclusion after these 23 accounts that UFOs pose no threat to national security.
Great. Like they're just explained away as natural phenomena.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, yeah. Like there's nothing that's dangerous to, you know, the United States as a country.
Whoops.
You know, or whatever.
Yeah.
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 The other thing that this leads to as well is this famous what would you call it? Famous press conference. Just after it happens. Well, not just after it happens, but actually, sorry, my fault. It's just after it happens on July the 29th. So the second sighting was on July 28th. So July 29th, it leads to this press conference with a guy with these 2 generals. One is General John Samford, and the other is General Roger R. Ramey.
Ramey.
You'll remember this guy.
Yeah.
Is the fella that Jesse Marcel said he delivered the UFO stuff to. And he was like, come out of the room for a moment. And then when they stepped back in, the box had changed. And there was, and it was the wreckage of a balloon. And he was like, well, these guys from the paper are here to take your photo. So this is the same guy. Like, so these 2 generals give this press conference. And again, this is an incredibly famous press conference. Like, if you've ever seen a video from the 1950s where a general goes, UFOs aren't real and they're not a danger to anybody and I wouldn't even worry about it, you know? This is that video.
Okay.
This is that press conference. So it kind of leads to that big thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Yeah, so that's it with the famous generals and the stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
And they said there's no danger from the UFOs.
Well.
Yeah. Now, they might have been saying that, Rachel, because this is a time of contact between people and our space brothers.
Yes.
Like, I suppose it's like that time in February 1954 when Dwight Eisenhower met the aliens.
I thought you were going to say that time at band camp.
Oh no, this is much better than band camp. Yeah, this is the time. Now I would have to say that this is allegedly.
Oh.
The last one is a documented historical event.
Okay.
This is what you would call a disputed historical event. But it is the time that the FBI started getting telepathic messages from the stars.
Yes.
And these messages said that the aliens would like to meet Dwight Eisenhower.
Okay. Give us some context. When is this?
This is 1954.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think Ike has, was he the president between 53 or something like that? To 61 or something?
I don't remember.
I don't know either. I don't know much about it. But yeah, he was so you know Ike, he was a general and he was no messing and, you know.
He was on American Horror Story.
He was on that. Yeah. Oh no, you actually have an idea. But the actual story with this is that they used there's an.
I was only half watching.
There's an entry in Eisenhower's diary about him going and getting his tooth fixed.
Presidents keep diaries?
Presidents keep archives. Like there's the White Eisenhower library, you know,
okay,
where all their documents are. Yeah, it's a fairly standard thing. Like, for instance, if you Google Dwight Eisenhower, or even Ike Eisenhower, or even Ike and the Aliens, or anything like that, like Eisenhower and UFO, one of the first things that you'll get is a document produced by the Eisenhower archive.
Okay.
And it's a document that they've produced that lists all of the mentions of UFOs in the Eisenhower archive. Like, that's how... And I mean, I read one thing where there's a guy who... He's one of the archivists, and he specialises in modes of transport. And one of his specializations is UFOs. Not because there's a lot of detail on UFOs. Like, there's a lot of detail on... Was Eisenhower travelling... Did he go there by train, or by car, or by boat, or do you know what I mean? And how long did it take? And,
right.
you know, information on the journeys that was taken by him and the administration, and, you know? But there's so many requests for UFOs that they've produced a handy index that'll tell you what box and what's discussed. There's little abstracts and stuff, you know? It's like a lot of these UFO things as well that ends up in archives. It's often just someone writing a letter, you know, and then they're saying, do you know, like, and then that gets archived.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's like, it's not necessarily... Yeah, like the emails between Gordon Cooper and John Podesta in the kind of WikiLeaks document thing, you know, like the...
Who's that?
Do you remember when they released all the emails, Hillary Clinton's campaign, John Podesta got his...
Oh, right.
Anyway, there's UFO stuff in there, like, but it's quite literally someone emailing John Podesta looking for an appointment. And
to talk about UFOs.
Yeah, and his staff giving him the runaround, like, essentially. But anyway, look,
right.
I digress. The FBI, okay? The FBI have someone that is getting psychic messages from beyond the stars.
Ooh.
And they are saying that they want to speak with Eisenhower.
Right.
Right? So Eisenhower pretends that he's taking a golf holiday in Palm Springs. And then he pretends, quite publicly at a public dinner, that he's chipped his porcelain tooth. You know, like his little, what you call it, his veneer. That he's chipped his veneer. And then he kind of goes, oh, I'm going to have to get someone to look at it. And then someone loudly goes, why, I know someone at the local Air Force base that could help you. He's the finest dental surgeon in Palm Springs. So they go down to... Now, this is where it gets weird. There's two different versions of this.
It's not weird yet.
It's not weird yet. So anyway, on the back of this, he goes down to... I'm going to go with the original story. He goes down to Edwards Air Force Base. And he's down there, and a saucer-shaped disc lands, and out come these two ETs, you know? And I believe we're calling them... Extraterrestrials. I believe also you can call them non-human entities, or non-human intelligence.
Were they greys?
So NHI. These are not greys. These are Nordics.
Oh.
Now, Nordics are like tall, willowy ones with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Okay.
They look like they're from the north, you
Vikings
know?
or something.
Like, they look like they're Nordics, yeah. And the Nordics come in, yeah? And they want to meet with Eisenhower because they're very concerned about nuclear weapons, you know? And they've seen the damage they can do.
Yeah.
And they're concerned that as the Cold War, which is nascent at this time, you know?
Yeah.
But as it starts to build up, that there's a possibility that the nuclear weapons, that mankind could destroy itself, you know? And Eisenhower won't give up the bombs. And he just sends them packing. He's like, I can't do that, you know?
Great.
We've got enemies everywhere. We need these big bombs.
Right.
And he sends them packing. And then, because now the taboo against like alien races and stuff meeting with humans is kind of broken, I think. And somewhere along the line, Eisenhower ends up getting in contact with the Greys, who are your classic guys, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, the Greys are like, look, we want to make a deal.
Picture Close Encounters.
Yeah, the Greys are your classic, they're the Close Encounters guys. They're the guys that we associate with aliens now, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, the Greys rock up, and they say that they're cool with nuclear weapons. You know, you can keep all the nuclear weapons. Don't even worry about that. We just kind of need to kidnap a few people and some livestock and stuff like that, and maybe do a little experimentation on them.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of experimentation. And Eisenhower's going, I'll never give up the bomb. And then they're like, no, do you remember, we're cool, you can keep the bomb. And he said, oh, okay. But are you going to hurt people? And they're like, no. I mean, we don't necessarily have to. And he was like, well, okay. So maybe if you just put people back where you found them and you don't do any damage, we'll be cool with that. And then that's the story. Mm-hmm. And then he meets them again. Now this is where it gets weird, because this story originally, I would think, pops up in maybe the early noughties, you know? Mm-hmm. Which would lead me to believe that it had been circulating in the underground for a while before that. So it kind of pops up in the early noughties. By the mid noughties, this guy called Michael Salla has taken it up. Michael Salla is great crack. He's an Australian with like academic credentials that talks about exopolitics. And you think that he's talking about it in an abstract academic way, but then you have a listen to him and he believes that there's all these different races and that there's this... He's an exopolitics guy, like, do you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, he'll talk about the different treaties between the Greys and the Draconoids, or the Nordics and the humans, and there's all these different treaties, and it's so funny. It's like Game of Thrones in space or something, you know. He has it that this happened at Edwards Air Force Base. Then there's another guy called Timothy Good, who in the last few years has said that it happens at Holloman Air Force Base, I think. But either way, that's what happened. Ike met the aliens. He made a treaty with them, allegedly. And that's it. That's the start of the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild times.
They were wild times, yeah. I mean, I'll talk about it in the next time as well. Like, but the kind of, do you know, there's a greater variety of alien experiences in the 50s and 60s, and you know.
Yeah.
They weren't as uniform. Like, the people like that, like we were saying there with the Hopkinsville goblin, and you know, the Flatwoods monster, and you know, they like every alien encounter was different, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it.
They keep flying. I need to stop.
Why are you removing them, Mara?
Because I just know. Well, I was gonna tell people, but so I'm. The original picture, I could pop it up here, has this whole corner kind of going into a gray gradient. And you can see it right here. I'll zoom in for you. I didn't change it up here. Mm-hmm. I didn't catch it in time. So then I decided to like mirror the leaves down here where it's supposed to be gray. The canvas says to put gray drills down, but I've decided to put down green. But then I noticed that in between here, between the leaves, this is background. So I'm going to keep that gray, and I'm going to change that back to gray as well, because it's not a leaf. It's hard to see the leaves. It's hard to see the leaves. Anyway, it's fine. It's going to be fine. But yeah, if you're interested in seeing those cryptid videos, we do have a playlist, which is our old diamond painting deep dives, essentially, but we called it Theory Tuesday, and we covered lots of weird and wacky stuff. It was very fun.
Lots of cryptids and stuff like that. Yeah.
Lots of cryptids, lots of aliens. Was there anything else in it? I think that's really mainly what we focused on.
That's about it. We did some Irish folklore stuff as well, I think. Like on the She and
oh yeah, for the Halloween episodes.
Yeah, for Halloween, yeah.
But if you'd like to have a look, I will put up some videos in the eye for you and the playlist as well, so you can check it out. But yeah, thanks for bringing us into the 50s.
No problem. Yeah. Thanks for listening to me.
You're very very welcome. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a fabulous day, a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you all very soon for our next diamond painting deep dive. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.